uh, at somewhere in the process, there should be a human in the loop circuit breaker that steps in and stops the AI processes and checks it, augments it, and makes sure that everything is on track. And that also creates a reinforcement loop so that the AI can learn from human judgment and experience.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to season 2 of Off to the Valley. I'm your host, Pratik Panda, and today we are joined by Evan Burkosky, co founder and CRO of Kimaru.ai. Originally from Vancouver Island, Evan spent summers working on his father's fishing boat, exporting catch to Japan, which led him to move there in 2003 to explore importing Canadian seafood and teaching English. Since then, he's founded 4 businesses, led market entry for a global SaaS platform, and now uses AI to revolutionize supply chain decisions in Tokyo's service industry. Evan, it's fantastic to have you with us. And I'm also particularly excited that you are from the Vancouver area, which is where I am.
Thanks very much for the intro. Yeah, it was a great experience growing up in Vancouver. Summers, working in the family business, fishing allowed me to get a lot of initial business experience, and it was also a great way to pay for school. So yeah, I really enjoyed that, and it gave me the foundational experience for starting my own businesses. Observing how my parents ran their business.
So, when you moved to Japan, did you move with your parents or was it just you?
No, no, it was. I set off after university, and I had studied, business and marketing in school, and I had this idea that I could go to Japan and pay the bills teaching English like many people do. I initially went on a working holiday visa, but right from the start, I'd had this idea that I could help import Canadian seafood and better market it in Japan. When I was growing up, it was the bubble period in Japan, and we sold the majority of our seafood to Japan. So I always had this idea that Japan is the next country to us. It's just over there across the ocean. We're selling all of our fish there. But I was also aware that we sold through a very complex supply chain. It felt like 50 different middlemen between, the fish that we caught and what actually got to people in market. So my initial hypothesis was that I would go to Japan and help create a more direct import route, and then help to, market and promote Canadian seafood in Japan.
That's amazing. I mean, typically Japan is probably not the top of the list for somebody to move from the West. I mean, there are a few challenges, language being one, and of course, a lot more, cultural differences as well. So you did have experience selling, Canadian seafood to Japan, and probably that created some sort of familiarity. But do you think there was anything else that was sort of a challenge when you thought about moving to Japan? Did it come across to you at any point that, hey, this place is going to be very different from what I'm used to? Do I really want to do this?
No, actually, I was just excited about the adventure. I was young, I was right out of school. I wanted to go see the world. And I was inspired by, I suppose there's a spirit of entrepreneurs in my family, both my parents, running small businesses. And I had an aunt who had been to Japan, and she actually had been sailing around the world, going on all sorts of adventures, and stopped in Japan at one point and told me all sorts of interesting stories. So I suppose it was sort of with a spirit of adventure that I wanted to go and see the world, and Japan was the first stop. I actually didn't envision initially that I would stay for my entire career in Japan, but it's now been 22 years. So the time went by very quickly, and I felt that I could be, very useful in Japan, which is probably why I stayed here. But the original idea of importing, seafood into Japan, although I got a lot of help from the Japanese government initially, from the Japan External Trade Organization, or JETRO, they gave me quite a lot of advice. What I learned in the first year was that I was unprepared. There were far too many complexities. The need for developing personal relationships in order to do business in Japan is, deeply woven into the fabric of society and business. And I simply didn't have the language skills. I really underestimated how much Japanese would be required in a business setting. I suppose I naively assumed that people would speak more English than certainly than they did at the time. So there were quite a few hurdles to overcome. I really had to take some time to learn the language and the culture and to develop personal relationships that made the whole concept more viable.
That's amazing. And you've gone from, running more of a traditional business to now something that's completely tech powered. How did that switch happen?
Yes, well, it was an interesting evolution. So the original import idea turned out to be very difficult. There's actually quite a lot of protectionism in the industry. In order to, build very strong supply chains, there are long, generational relationships that have been built up. The marketing component, though, was, let's say, experienced far fewer headwinds. It was much easier to get the marketing piece going. And because I had studied what we would now say are the foundations of digital marketing in school, I knew how to code a little bit. I knew how to build out basic, email campaigns and then rudimentary what is now search engine optimization. Uh, that took off. And so for 7 years, I ran a marketing agency that specialized in multilingual website development and then SEO and SEM and advertising campaigns and so on. And we had the opportunity to work with quite a large number of, let's say, well known brands throughout Japan. Uh, it coincided with the boom in inbound tourism. And so we worked quite a lot with businesses in the Niseko ski resort area up in Hokkaido, the Hokkaido government itself, and then several prefectures that were engaging in inbound tourism promotion. So that evolution from developing multilingual websites into the current Kimaru platform, which is designed around AI driven decision augmentation, essentially echoed the industry's evolution. We went from building websites to observing how people use the websites, using that analytic data to gather large data sets and then engage in A B testing, optimization, and eventually use all of that big data to power personalization and recommendation algorithms. So my career somewhat echoed the overall ad tech and martech evolution into using, again, those data sets for machine learning, the targeting of user experiences, essentially the underlying algorithms that power advertising online. And then with the latter part of my career or sorry, more like the middle part of my career before founding Kimaru, was identifying best in class ad tech and martech and then helping bring that to the Japanese market. So I did quite a lot of market entry consulting and then became the country manager for several Silicon Valley and Israel-based tech startups to help them, build out the team here, run the go-to-market strategy, and get a footprint in Japan. But in order to solve very specific problems, like helping with digital transformation, helping to use this growing body of, let's say, technology to solve very specific problems. And that, was a very interesting and transformative process, but essentially it was all around helping Japan with its digital transformation.
That's amazing. So basically, there are no shortcuts. It's
There are no shortcuts. Yes, I had to learn everything sort of from the ground up and just constant study at all times. And I would say if you want to be an entrepreneur in Japan, that's the key is just always be studying.
So, talking about being an entrepreneur in Japan, for all of our listeners, right? A lot of them are entrepreneurs themselves. A lot of them are kind of on the path to entrepreneurship. What is exciting about Japan, if you were to give a few reasons why Japan should be a good consideration place, um, apart from obviously your market being there, if at all, but if for other reasons also, what could be some motivating reasons to be in Japan?
Well, Japan is an incredibly well-structured society. It's an excellent place to do business, but it has quite a few large looming economic problems. I think everybody is aware of the declining birth rate and so the declining working population. In order to maintain economic prosperity, Japan really needs to engage in this shift into more automation, augmentation, better usage of AI, better usage of overall digital technologies as well as hardware. Japan excels at hardware, but lags behind in the digital world in many ways. So it's currently this implementation of AI into the physical world that I think presents the greatest opportunity for people to help. And I think that has to be the key. Really, the key to any business is trying to find a large problem to solve and then being as helpful as possible in solving that problem. And if anybody is thinking about building a business in Japan, helping to solve that declining worker population issue, that's a massive problem to focus on.
Is it easy or difficult to sort of sell to Japanese businesses? Do you need some sort of a local partner to do that, or do you think people are more open to buying tech or software from anybody?
You absolutely need a local partner, local connections, or at least to spend the time investing in building relationships. Uh, Japan is quite unique in that it's not, let's say, it's not business is not structured to be quite as winner take all competitive as say the North American market, just
Mm.
as point of contrast. And so in Japan, people would prefer to do business with people that they know and trust, even if it's not the absolute most competitive cutting edge technology per se. So let's say that probably a good way to explain that is that the longevity of the relationship is more important than any short-term wins that you might get from technology. And so if you're entering the Japanese market, it's very important to leverage any personal relationships that you might already have, people who can give you a personal introduction, or to develop relationships with partners. It's quite often the channel partner play is integral to any go-to-market strategy. And that might look like systems integrators if it's a technical solution, or it might look like simply finding people that can give you a personal introduction if it's more of a, let's say, hardware-based solution.
Um, so that's interesting, right? So it could seem like a sort of bottleneck, but is there some, or are you aware of any incentives that the Japanese government is doing now, especially with entrepreneurship in general in Japan, but also trying to attract more foreign talent to come in and set up businesses in Japan?
Yes, absolutely. Because of that declining worker population issue, and because of, I think, increasing awareness that Japan has fallen behind a little bit in digital technology, the Japanese government is creating quite a few initiatives to improve to encourage startup entrepreneurs to come to Japan. In fact, in our case with Kimaru, the current startup, we were greatly assisted and enhanced by the JETRO startups team. So again, that's the Japan External Trade Organization. Different team that I worked with 20 years ago, but very active team now called JETRO Startups that has worked to bring several leading class accelerators to the Japanese market. And in our case, we were accepted into the Alchemist Japan inaugural cohort. We graduated from class one in December, and we are now actually currently going through the Alchemist US program. That's been extremely helpful, and not just in the fact that it comes with equity, but becomes equity investment, but it comes with coaching and an excellent alumni network, and the ability to create really this bridge between Silicon Valley and Tokyo. But it's not just the one accelerator program. JETRO has been bringing several best-in-class accelerators to market. There's 500 Global and Antler and Techstars and Plug and Play. All of them are getting government support. And in many ways, what's probably most important in the Japanese market, which is not just financial support, but more like cultural acceptance. I think we're reaching a really pivotal time in Japan's startup ecosystem where the average person is becoming aware of the concept of startups, what it really means to create an innovative business that can be very intrinsically motivating to work at. And so this is becoming a critical change agent in Japanese society where it's now becoming okay to be an entrepreneur. For much of the past three generations, really since Japan rebuilt during the economic miracle after the Second World War, for the first time in three generations, there's this cultural acceptance, this sort of top-down permission to go and start something new and maybe even be a little bit disruptive of the, let's say, the old Japan Inc. infrastructure or the existing infrastructure, right? And it's not just this government, let's say, push that's creating that acceptance. It's also the realization of the large incumbent corporations that they need to move faster. They need to be more adaptive in order to be more resilient. And in fact, that was the original, let's say, driving force behind creating what we do is helping Japanese corporations to be more adaptive and resilient, and we do that through improving decision making.
On that note, let's talk a little bit more about Kimaru, right? You've mentioned it's a decision intelligence platform for supply chain. Can you share like a real world example and tell us what Kimaru does?
Yeah, so very specifically, having worked in Japan, as I said, with the agency and then bringing tech companies to the Japanese market, I've worked with a lot of Japanese corporations on their digital transformation. And that meant implementing both MarTech and AdTech software, as well as quite often helping with the overall tech stack. So I worked quite a bit on the consulting side, often alongside systems integrator partners to implement systems like ERP, enterprise resource planning, CRM, customer relationship management software, and so on, which are core building blocks of a digital transformation strategy. But through that consulting process, what I always found was there's a lot of preference for existing, let's say, rule-based processes that have quite often been in place since the 70s, are very time intensive and often quite analog. And because they've worked for so long, there's a real resistance to change something that's a fundamental part of doing business. But there is a change agent coming, which is the world is moving at a faster and faster pace. We've moved from the industrial age into the information age, and you have to move very quickly to keep up. Plus, even if you build an excellent system, there's so much, there are so many change factors in today's business world. It introduces this chaos factor that's very hard to keep up with. So what we realized is, both me and my co-founders, both through our consulting practice and through previous projects that we'd worked on and technology that we built, we realized that what Japan needs is a faster decision-making process in order to be more adaptive and resilient. And based on both the machine learning technology that I'd used at previous companies where I'd been the country manager, and our CTO, Dr. Harish's fundamental research and the PhD that he did while he was working at Panasonic in their R&D lab there in Osaka, as well as our third co-founder, Sinjin's experience in logistics and previously working at Microsoft, we saw that there was this need for improving the overall decision-making cycle. If you can make faster decisions, then you can be more adaptive in times of chaos, and therefore you can be much more resilient. And as we identified this need for better decision making, and then found the research of our advisor, Dr. Lorianne Pratt, and her decision intelligence methodology, we saw a way to combine the fundamental research that Dr. Harish had been doing with the emergence of the agentic layer so that we could build decision intelligence agents to work alongside people and improve the overall decision-making process through decision augmentation. And that solves many fundamental problems in many different business processes. But we saw that the best application of this technology would be to the supply chain and logistics space, because Japan is still a powerhouse in manufacturing. And if we can improve the overall manufacturing, logistics, ability to get products to market, then that's somewhere that we could be extremely helpful. So the original hypothesis was to improve Japan's supply chain decision-making process, help move from the existing rule-based processes that are very analog, mostly done in Excel spreadsheets, to this new decision intelligence platform. But as we dug into that, we found that it's not just Japan. In fact, the entire global supply chain runs mostly on spreadsheets. Even if companies have implemented a great ERP system, or they have good business intelligence tools, they might have all sorts of great dashboards built out. All of that is still very reactive and backwards looking. It doesn't allow for forward-looking, more prescriptive methodologies. And so if we look at the evolution of the industry, it's been from descriptive analytics that tell what happened, to predictive analytics that tell what's likely to happen, to prescriptive analytics that tell us what we can do about it. And so our platform, Kimaru, a decision intelligence platform, tells what's likely to happen, makes recommendations on what to do about it, and then works with the human decision makers in a feedback loop to improve the accuracy of those recommendations over time.
So one of the interesting things that I caught on from this was, in general, right, like AI tools are getting super popular. There are so many different AI agents being launched every week. A lot of people are obviously worried about AI replacing human jobs. One of the things that you mentioned a few times was that of augmentation. And you mentioned that your idea is to use AI to augment rather than replace the human insight. Can you share a little bit more about what your vision is with AI for Kimaru, but also, in general, what do you think is the trends for AI in general?
Certainly. Well, I think what we're seeing in market right now is a natural backlash against over automation or over reliance on AI. There's been, of course, the initial excitement and hype around the development of LLMs. And of course, people associate AI with LLMs today. Although the reality is, a platform like Kimaru uses multiple different types of AI in combination, working together. And much of what our platform is built on is the more workhorse AI that's been in market, running product recommendations on Amazon and advertising algorithms for 10 years now. But the key point there, I think, is as people got excited about seeing LLM applications and this new generation of AI applied to the workforce, uh, I think people were very excited to be able to outsource a lot of, let's say, manual processes to AI. And there there is quite a lot of potential efficiency improvements that comes from automating processes, but we can't automate everything. And so let's say that in any process where you want to bring AI into it, whether it's a decision making process or even something like robotic process automation, let's say in a warehouse environment, for example, what you need to do is set the circuit breaker at the correct level. Uh, at somewhere in the process, there should be a human in the loop circuit breaker that steps in and stops the AI processes and checks it, augments it, and makes sure that everything is on track. And that also creates a reinforcement loop so that the AI can learn from human judgment and experience. And what we're finding is that initial vertical AI agents, initial automation that is an evolution of the previous rule-based automated processes that are an evolution, in many cases, of ERP or RPA systems. They're setting, let's say, their temperature settings a little bit too high. So that circuit breaker tends to be very high up in the loop, if there is one at all. And what we've seen is necessary and what we've built into Kimaru is the ability to set that human in the loop circuit breaker uh, at lower points in key processes without creating too much friction. So we do that through a visual UI that allows for the AI to easily make a recommendation or ask for human input at the right points, and for the human user to very quickly interact with the AI through this visual interface and move the process forward again. So as long as we build those augmented processes into the workforce, then we retain the ability to capture all of the creative problem solving, uh, critical thinking, and human judgment, which is what humans are great at, in combination with the uh, automation processes, data cleaning, data ratification, the correction of data, the aggregation of data that AI is really, really good at. So that allows for AI to take over a lot of the manual processes and reduce the cognitive load on the decision maker and allow that decision maker to be much more effective and much more adaptive and creative in their problem solving. Now, that's specific to a decision intelligence platform like ours, but for really any AI augmented process, even if it's simply writing marketing content, you don't want to outsource the entire, let's say, blog post to ChatGPT. You could use it to augment your process, but you have to be there, I would say, at quite a early stage in that process. So you want to set your circuit breaker to be very early, and essentially every sentence, every paragraph, you should be working alongside the AI in an editorial process. So I guess the best way to think of it is that the workplace of the future, essentially where we are right now, is humans and AI agents working alongside each other. And the better we build out the user interfaces and user experiences for this workplace of the future, the more effective we can be.
I think that's great advice, and especially the fact that you could think of introducing a human in the middle to sort of make sure that the entire AI process is well augmented. I think that's great advice. Thanks for sharing. And we'll switch gears a little bit. So, you as a Canadian, you've built a life and career in Japan, and you've been there 22 years now. You are at a stage where, with the Alchemist Accelerator in the US, you're also trying to figure out a move or a launch in the US. Uh, how are you thinking about this? Um, a lot of founders around the world want to move to the US, and because that's where the market is or where they see the most potential, maybe there is something for them to learn from your journey and how you are approaching your entry into the US market.
Certainly. So we designed Kimaru to be global from day one. And the idea was to both bring this solution to the market and help solve decision making for the largest number of people as possible, and also create the example of a Japanese startup that could be global right from the start, right? Because quite a lot of Japanese startups tend to focus on just the domestic market because it is quite large. It's the world's fourth largest GDP. But then that tends to create a culture which makes it hard for them to expand globally in future. Right? So we advocate for building the global mindset right from the start. So right from the start, we've tried to build a structure which we think is going to work globally. Our first expansion point beyond Japan is the US. And so we're doing a concurrent North America and wider APAC go-to-market strategy. And what I've seen work very well for companies like us, which it's very close to a traditional SaaS model or software as a service, but in our case, it's a SaaS plus AI. So there's a little bit of a hybridization and a new business model there. It's still similar to the seat or consumption type pricing of a traditional SaaS platform, but in our case, augmented by this the win-win that comes through creating value for the end user. So essentially, that's our business model. But it allows us to be remote, distributed, and work through what I call GTM nodes. So we have various teams, quite small teams in strategic regions. And we're building out the go-to-market team for APAC here in Tokyo. And then we're building out our go-to-market team for North America in Austin, Texas. And that was partly because of some proactive tax incentives that Texas has put in place, and partly the proximity to food and beverage and supply chain in North America. So as a regional hub, that works well for us. But we're also in the accelerator program. Alchemist US is based in San Francisco, and of course, that's a hub for tech. So we have these small teams, 2 or 3 people in these various regions, and then we work asynchronously across time zones, mostly using Slack. And so my office is essentially my laptop, Slack. And if I have that and together with my phone, I can work anywhere. So even in the past couple of months, I've been in 4 or 5 different countries and just working across these time zones, syncing up with our team whenever we can. And we plan to continue building out these nodes or launch centers, GTM centers, in other strategic geographic regions, and continue to run this asynchronous workflow, essentially using tools like Slack. Now, there's a huge difference in each geographic region culturally, though. So one thing that we have to do in Japan is sync up with the speed of business. Sales cycles here tend to be about 3 times longer on average than they would be in North America. And that's mostly because sales requires developing personal relationships, quite often working with partners. In this region, it's much more of a channel partner-led strategy. Same thing in Taiwan, for example. I was there a couple of weeks ago, and we're developing our channel partner strategy there and looking to get into an accelerator program there so we can build out the same sort of regional nodes there. But to get back to your primary question about North America, Silicon Valley, I think, requires understanding the speed of business that's required for the most competitive market in tech. You have to learn how to do everything at Silicon Valley speed. That's probably the most difficult thing, I would say, for Japanese startups going to Silicon Valley. That's probably the hardest thing for them to get used to, is just the speed of business. So whether it's creation of your pitch or the speed of your sales cycles or really the speed of your product development, everything has to be at least 3 times faster than what people are used to. And I think that's the natural outcome of a highly competitive market, and one reason why Silicon Valley is such a powerhouse for tech.
That's amazing, Evan. Thank you so much for sharing those insights. And as we get closer to the end of this recording, I want to ask you a few more fun, rapid fire style questions. Um,
Sure.
so, what's one startup that you admire a lot, obviously, apart from your own?
I've been quite impressed by Sakana AI. Um, there are also they're a team of expat founders or foreign founders, ex-Googlers that started here in Japan. They're building out some very interesting, unique AI models, and I think they're going to solve some real problems here. And they've been in the media. So I think they're helping to create the around a Japanese startup that's designed for global from day one.
All right. Entrepreneur life can be hard more often than not. Everybody says it's a roller coaster, but more often than not, there are more lows than there are highs. What do you do to unwind or keep yourself positive?
One's mental health is critical. You have to take time for that. I had this is my fourth startup, and so in some of the previous ones, there were highs and lows. There were some very tough periods. Uh, One thing I found is that as a founder, you have to ask for help, and you don't necessarily have to be this. I suppose growing up in the fishing industry, I had the idea that the captain of the ship is infallible and always has all the answers, doesn't have to ask for help from anybody. Um, that's not always the case. As a founder, you do have to ask for help. And so you have to get good advisors and good mentors, and you have to be willing to ask for assistance. In fact, I went through a period where I tried to shoulder far too much, and it caused negative repercussions throughout personal and business life. After that experience, to help encourage founders to ask for help and to help create the structure for that, I volunteered for several years on the board of directors for Tell Japan, which is a mental health organization that runs a support lifeline and a, clinics in Japan for assistance for anybody who's struggling. And for anybody listening to this podcast in Japan, if you need help in English, please do reach out to Tell Japan. It's a great way to get some assistance. For those elsewhere around the world, don't hesitate to try using apps like BetterHealth or just reaching out for counseling services. Um, the other thing is just take time for yourself. I found that living in Tokyo was too busy, and the sort of constant, always on energy of being right in the city was too much for me. So, a few years ago, my wife and I moved down to the coast. So, we live an hour south of Tokyo. And because I grew up on the water, I get a lot of, let's say, recharging and relaxation from marine activities, surfing, sailing, snorkeling and that kind of thing. So living in an environment here where we're at the beach and I can do that regularly, that really helps. But for people who are in a more urban environment, go out for a run or find ways to get a little bit of time for yourself and reset and maintain your balance. I think that's the most important.
Yeah, I think very rightly said. And more often than not, the entrepreneurship journey is celebrated when people are like always running, always busy. We've sort of, over the years, made that the normal thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And more often than not, people are struggling to share times when they're struggling, and they need help, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you talked
Yeah,
about this in one of your other answers also, is to be more open about asking for help. And
yeah,
help in not always in business, as well as if you are having a tough time, thanks for, you shared so many resources, and every place has something that you can access. So definitely access those resources, do things that give you that energy, right? One last question before I let you go. What's an emerging tech trend that you are very excited about that you see evolve over the next 5 years?
well, the discipline, the field, and the software category of decision intelligence, I think is extremely exciting. So have to give a shout out to Dr. Lorian Pratt, who helped to coin and popularize the term decision intelligence. And her book, well, two books actually. Link was her first book, and the second one is the Decision Intelligence Handbook, and her blogs at her website. They're extremely helpful in helping us understand this emerging discipline that really helps to bring AI into the workforce. Essentially, what decision intelligence is causal outcome modeling. So, understanding our desired outcome, the actions we can take to achieve it, and then the levers that we can pull to affect that, and then building out our, let's say, machine learning or AI models to help model that out at critical points, as opposed to the old method of processing all data that we can find and then trying to mine it for insights. So it's much more effective, it's much more compute lean and efficient. I think that's the most interesting emerging trend because it will allow us to get through our current growing pains around stochasticism, the unreliability of LLMs, these wonderful, rocks that can now appear to think, but aren't yet structured in such a way that they can really reliably be applied to business processes or require systems like decision intelligence in order to be structured correctly. So if anybody is interested in the application of AI to real business processes and improving the reliability of these processes, I highly recommend researching decision intelligence. Dr. Pratt, Cassie Kozyrkov, there are several thought leaders in this space. So definitely check those out or reach out to me on LinkedIn and I'll give you some book recommendations. Oh, and quick shout out to David Pidsley, analyst at Gartner, who just launched a summer reading in decision intelligence post and has an excellent reading list there.
That's awesome, Evan. Thank you so much for sharing your insights as well as all these amazing recommendations. A ton of value in this episode for sure. Thank you so much again for taking out time. It was amazing talking to you.
Likewise, thanks very much. Really appreciate the opportunity.
And that wraps up today's episode. Before we sign off, I would like to thank you for your support and thanks for tuning in. If you loved today's episode, then don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Be kind, be happy, challenge the norm. I'll see you folks again for the next one.